So over on the NA version of the game, we have two other servants that I haven't covered that have dropped for the new interlude campaign. I mean, the primary servant is Reigns, but Sherlock and Lakshmi Bai have also come back around. It's just, I'm not sure if I'll have the time to cover both of them, because I'm not sure with Lasengel being at the head of FGO now, if they're just going to drop the next event right after this Fate Requiem event is going to end. So I put it to the polls. You know, you got to make sure you're always checking that community tab, and you guys seemed for me to want to go ahead and talk about Sherlock, which I'm actually really happy about. This is the servant I wanted to discuss because I think Sherlock is actually really insane. I think he's very fun to use, can make challenge quests way more easy, but nobody actually wants to talk about him. In fact, when I was telling a friend, I was like, oh dude, Sherlock won the polls, I'm gonna make a video on Sherlock. His immediate response was, nah dude, Sherlock sucks. And I'm like, dude, Sherlock is not bad. It's just, he's not as good as the other supports, but that doesn't mean that he's bad. It's the same thing of like, yes, Koyanskaya is better than Merlin, but that doesn't mean that Merlin is bad. It just means that Koyanskaya is better, but you can still use Merlin, right? So we're going to talk about him in today's video. If you haven't already, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content. Also, as a little quick announcement, I am going to be hosting a Master Duel tournament this Saturday with a $100 cash prize to the first place winner and a $50 cash prize to the second place winner. So if that interests you, make sure you come on out, sign up, join the Discord, DM me your deck and your side deck because it will be a best of 3 format, and do your best to be the one to win the gold, or I guess the money in this case. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into the servant, starting off with his hits. And the boy Sherlock kind of takes a page out of Reigns' book, or Reigns takes a page out of Sherlock's book, since I guess Sherlock did come out first, but that's besides the point. He is rocking a double-click, double arts deck, and in Reigns' case, that's because Reigns is also trying to function a little bit as a star-genning support-type servant, but it doesn't really work out as well for her. She can't really fill that secondary role because she is a rider and her natural star weight is insanely high, so she tends to rob the other servants of their stars. Now, Sherlock being a ruler does have some pretty naturally high star weight, but the difference is that Sherlock is more of a crit support type servant, so it's actually okay if Sherlock takes the stars for himself because he himself can make very good use out of them. See, Sherlock can either be an insane crit DPS support type servant, or he can just be the crit DPS himself and absolutely obliterate the enemy. His quick cards aren't too bad with 3 hits apiece, and he's rocking 10% star gen, meaning especially in a Brave Chain where you can get both of these quick cards, the guy can actually drop a fair bit of stars. But if you're struggling to find those quick cards, or you're just not able to get any Brave Chains off with him, he does have a skill to help out a little bit when it comes to getting stars on the board. His art cards themselves are actually deceptively powerful, and what I mean by that is that they are being buffed by one of his passive skills to buff their performance by 12%, meaning even though they're 3-hit arts cards with 0.76% NP gain, and keeping in mind that he is a crit servant, so you're more than likely going to be getting crits on said arts cards, they're actually even better than they appear, and he does have that godly omnipotent 5-hit extra attack. If you're not in the know, let me tell you, the extra attack is the strongest card of all time, as it produces stars, NP, and does big boy damage. Its only flaw is that it cannot crit, which I guess for Sherlock actually is kind of a bad thing, because the whole point of using him is that you want to do big crits. But regardless, the way that his deck is structured is very, very solid. They gave him very good hits, especially for a servant of his era. Because even in that year 2 and even year 3 era, they were really starting to shaft a few servants here and there with some odd hits. It seems as though they're kind of ironing it out now, although there are still a few servants that won't be mentioned that do still have a few weird hits. But let's go ahead and move over to his skills, because the skills are what pay the bills, especially so when it comes to support type servants. So let's start off with skill 1, which actually just has a nice, decent rounding off of effects. It allows Sherlock to seal an enemy's NP for 1 turn, which is nice. You want to see that on your pseudo support type servants, because having some form of NP control is a form of survivability. Being able to stall off the enemy can buy you that 1 extra turn for your Merlin to get their illusion skill back, for Scotty to get her NP, Castoria to get her NP, or Castoria's 3rd skill to come off cooldown, your Tamamo to get her 1st skill back. It's just very good to be able to push it back 1 more turn. because sometimes one turn is all you need. Then, most recently, he actually got this part of his skill buffed. He reduces all enemies' arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns. What this was previously is non-existent, is that this wasn't a part of the skill before they actually gave him his interlude, and this helps him out a little bit, and this especially helps him out if you want to use him in art setups. They predominantly want you to use his arts cards, as they do actually give him an arts buff in one of his skills, so they do want him to be kind of like an arts crit support servant while also being able to do arts crits himself. But this is very nice because it not only gives him damage, but it gives the entire party damage as well. And while you might have wanted this to be like a party-wide at 20% arts buff, do keep in mind that this is giving you a different debuff type on the enemy, because in FGO you want to try to spread your buffs out as much as possible, because those different buffs multiply into each other, and you don't want to get caught in the trap of only buffing one of your damage types, right? Instead of just having like a 50% arts buff, you would ideally have like a 20% arts buff and then like a 30% attack buff or like a 30% NP damage buff, because those different buff types are going to multiply into each other. So sneakily, Sherlock is actually buffing the damage of his arts allies, which I don't know if you're going to use him with art servants. I think he pairs very well with buster servants as well, but we'll talk about that when we get to his NP. But that other thing that I was talking about, where he has something in the back pocket to gen some stars, if you're not getting those quick cards, it's not really star genning, it's just him dropping 20 stars free for you and the entire party to use, which is very, very solid. Any servant that has star bombs like these are generally going to be pretty good at being a crit servant, because they can just drop the stars whenever they want, and it's on a nice 5-turn cooldown. So not a bad debut for the servant. Moving on to his second skill, this actually kind of carries on into showing that they wanted to make him a crit type servant, as you get some pretty decent star weight for 1 turn. Unfortunate that it's only 1 turn, but I assume the reason they only made it a 1-turn buff is so that everybody else could also indulge in the star genning. They didn't want Sherlock to selfishly be stealing all the stars, because he's also, remember, supposed to be a support type servant as well. And predominantly, you're going to want to pair the second skill with the third skill. When we get to it, you'll understand why, and I'll explain. But you're going to want to use it for specifically arts bursting turns. When you have like both of your arts cards, you're going to want to pop off with both of those when you have the third skill active. But he also gives himself debuff immunity for 3 turns. I've talked about this for other servants. Anytime somebody has just flat debuff immunity for a couple of turns, it's very, very good. Even on like a bad servant, or a quote-unquote bad servant like Arjuna Archer, who has debuff immunity for like 5 turns, it's absolutely insane, because that servant basically is immune to debuffs, right? As long as you're timing this correctly, or God forbid you're using Sherlock with Tamamo, who can lower skill cooldown, you can basically have the guy never be susceptible to debuffs, which is insanely good on your support type servants, especially when a lot of bosses want to just stack burn, stack curse, stun ya, charm ya, lower your defense to ridiculous levels, and then just flick you out of existence. It's very, very good to just have the ability to say, I'm not getting hit by any of that cringe, I'm setting up my debuff immunity for 3 turns. Because keep in mind, more and more servants are getting the debuff immunity type where they just get like 1 hit of debuff immunity that lasts for 3 turns. So like, I don't know why we're kind of getting worse debuff immunity. So it's a very refreshing sight to see that this guy has debuff immunity for just a flat 3 turns. But then finally, there is his third skill, and this is where you want to pair that second skill with the third skill, because this gives him a 50% arts buff for 1 turn. And even though Sherlock doesn't have a battery, if you're going to absorb all the crit stars, then buff your arts cards by 50% when they already have decent 3 hits and 0.76% NP gain backing them up, and a sneaky 12% in the passive skills, meaning this is actually 62% to his arts performance. It's basically going to function as a battery. It also tacks on an evasion, which is a little annoying, because it's like the Raiko problem, the Jack problem, where the servant's main damage steroid is tied to their survivability. But at least Sherlock's not completely reliant on it, because he does have the NP seal on his first skill, so technically has 2 forms of survivability. One of them helps the party, this one is more specifically for himself. It is, though, albeit annoying, that it is tied to his damage steroid, because you're probably going to have to waste the evasion if you get a very good turn with his arts cards and you have crit stars available. You're going to want to capitalize on that, because then you can basically, especially if you already have his NP, you can fire his NP, get all the buffs from his NP, have these insanely buffed arts cards with crit stars, and then just obliterate the enemy with massive crits, and then also refund all of your NP back. So can be very annoying to sacrifice the evasion, but some people would say, do you need the evasion if you obliterate the enemy in 3 turns? Maybe. If they have a break bar and they fire their NP because they charge it to maximum, maybe you would need the evasion. So overall, I get that his skills aren't like super insane by modern standards. Like, they do not compare to like Castoria, Koyenskaya, even Scotty, but they're not bad. You definitely have a very solid foundation for a servant here. But the reason I always rep Sherlock, the reason I will defend him, is that if we go over to his NP absolutely goes Hamtaro. This NP is literally just like, do you want to make a mockery out of any boss in the game? Do you just want to absolutely obliterate any boss in the game? Fire Sherlock's NP. Because just listen to the laundry list of things that this guy is giving you to obliterate anybody in the game. Depending on his NP level, he's going to lower all enemies' defense by 30 to 50% for 3 turns. That's pretty good, especially if you can just happen to get yourself an NP5 Sherlock Holmes. Not saying you should be pursuing that, but if you can find somebody that has one, that's a lot of damage, for lack of a better term. Then he's going to give the entire party Pierce Invincibility and Pierce Defense for free for 3 turns, meaning doesn't matter what type of cringe the boss sets up. If they set up a dodge, invincibility, high levels of defense, doesn't matter, you're breaking through it, guaranteed. Who cares if they give themselves unremovable invincibility or unremovable dodge? We're just gonna bypass all of that cringe entirely. And then his overcharge is giving the entire party 50 to 100% crit damage for 3 turns. And like I was saying, there are ways to loop his NP. Even though it's a non-damaging NP, if you can get a very good turn where you have Sherlock's NP lined up with 2 arts cards, or even just one of his arts cards with a crit while his 3rd skill is active, that boy is going to refund all, if not close to all of his NP. And then you can just stack it together, so even if you only got overcharge 1, your party's going to have 100% crit damage. At least for the next 2 turns, then it's going to drop back down to 50% unless you loop his NP again, which, depending on your team comp, depending on, you know, if you're using him with like some waivers, maybe Castoria pairs very well with Sherlock Holmes. It might depend on, you know, how easy it is to get back his NP, but yeah, the boy's NP is absolutely insane. The only thing I think they really need to do to make this guy like an S tier support type servant is on his NP, let him drop like 30 stars. Boom, drop the mic. He's like one of the best support type servants in the game. That's all you really got to do with him, which I think they're being cowards and they're too afraid to make Sherlock good, but come on, dude. Sherlock is like one of the actual main characters in Chaldea right now. He needs to be a little bit better. He needs to be a little bit more in the spotlight because I think he's definitely good. His skills are fine. They're not insane, but they're not bad either, right? They're pretty passable, especially considering that he's like a year 2 servant or something, right? Like he's really old. But his NP is absolutely godly, so you just tack on like even 20 stars every time he fires his NP. The boy is going to be insane. He is going to be sick, nasty, disgusting. Or if you don't want to do that, have him give the entire party 50 to even 100% crit star drop rate for the next 3 turns. Boom, he's insane, right? Either one of those buffs. It just makes it easier for the party to drop stars, either by him just dropping them directly or buffing everybody's crit star generation rate to insane levels. He'll be absolutely nutty. So just keep an eye on this servant. I don't think he's nutty broken yet. I think his NP is really good and his skills are fine. But like with Castoria coming out in potentially a month and a half at this point, because we're kind of speeding through the schedule at this point. I mean, we're going really fast. So she might drop early. I wouldn't be surprised if she does. It's definitely not worth going for Sherlock Holmes, but I'd keep your eye on him. And for everybody that wanted me to make this video because they're like, yeah, I get that Sherlock Holmes is not garbage, I hope you feel justified because he's not bad. It's just the other supports are better. But again, doesn't make him bad. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you comment your thoughts in the comment section down below. I mean, that's the whole point of it being there. If you want more content, I stream every weekday over on my Twitch, and I upload exclusive content for channel members if you click that join button. Again, like I was saying, there is a $100 cash prize tournament this Saturday at 5 p.m. EST over on my Twitch. Hop on Master Duel. Even if you've never played Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not that hard to pick up. just go grab all of your old boomer cards, grab your mirror forces, and you'll probably do unironically well because people won't be expecting it, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, all that good stuff. And then if you want to support the channel for free, you can download LD emulator down in the description down below. It is absolutely free, it supports the channel, and it's a great way to play FGO or any other mobile game on your computer. And I personally use it for both my NA and JP versions of the game. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of there or out of here, who knows. But maybe I'm just a little too tired. But it is exam week and I got my final exam tomorrow, so you know, hopefully that all goes good. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.